Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of, what do we call it? The Big Show. Let's do the Big Show every day at 5 o'clock, close to 5 o'clock as we can. A lot of times we're just basically holding out hope that some kind of news breaks on this quarterback situation, which is just not going to happen. And I think that one of the things that's going to be very, very interesting to see is if there ever does develop a timeline. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are speculating about is the fact that I think that there are a lot of people that are speculating that Aaron Rodgers is actually playing the Steelers. I would be careful with that, and I'll tell you why. If you think about it, okay, if you think about it, there's a good chance that the Steelers have a timeline from Aaron Rodgers, and we just don't know about it. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not. And there's so much stuff flying out there about Aaron Rodgers that I'd be honest with you, I really believe he's the kind of guy that is just sort of keeping things to himself, and a lot of people seem to be guessing at. And so when I say, a lot of people are guessing at what's happening, I don't necessarily think that there are necessarily people that are just making things up, but I do believe that pretty much, if you think about it, there probably are a lot of guys that maybe have sources that are close to being close to Rodgers that really just are getting little pieces of information. In other words, on Friday, okay, when we left on Friday, the story was that basically Aaron Rodgers was going to look into the Vikings, or the Vikings were becoming a real possibility. And if I'm not mistaken, Diane Rossini, who does a really good job covering, the NFL, actually tweeted something, and I was just trying to find it, to actually tweeted something to the effect of, her gut basically is telling her that basically she thinks that the Vikings are probably going to be the team that he ends up with. That they seem to have emerged as sort of the top, team for Aaron Rodgers. Well, I think that really, when you look at it from that standpoint, okay, someone like Diana Rossini says something like that, and you say, well, she's probably right. Here it is. And she says, Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers and Giants are still waiting, but all eyes are on the Vikings and their key decision makers. And so it's really one of those things where, a number of people were reporting that the Vikings were probably going to be a team that gets involved here late, and that they are, going to have interest in Rodgers, and they're probably going to be the team that gets it done. But here's the thing. Literally like 2 hours later, someone tweeted out that the Vikings actually have zero interest in Aaron Rodgers. They're not even going to meet with him. They're not going to talk to him because they have no interest in him, because they want J.J. McCarthy to be their starting quarterback. And, of course, he's the rookie that they got. So, and my point is, it's not to disparage all of these people who are reporting stuff. That's not at all what I'm doing. All I'm trying to say is there's been so much that's been, written and talked about when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, that at the end of the day, I just don't think that anybody really has good sources from the standpoint of Aaron Rodgers is probably keeping this pretty close to the vest. Now, I've read several places, where Aaron Rodgers has said, or allegedly has said, he's going to make his announcement on the Pat McAfee show. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. Quite frankly, I don't care. What I care about is what is the timeline. But I would be very, very, very careful. Very careful. Assuming that somehow that like the Steelers and the Giants have no idea what's going on here, because I think they do. I think that he's probably been in touch with him a little bit from the standpoint of, I think he's probably said, hey, you know what? Give me a few days. Let me think about this. And I think that's where it is. And so, I don't know. I feel like we're just going to continue to wait to see what happens. Now, I think the other interesting thing is there was discussions about Russell Wilson and the Giants. And he visited the Giants. Was it Friday, I think? Friday was the day he visited the Giants. Thursday he visited the Browns. Seems pretty clear to me like he's not going to be with the Browns. But there were discussions that Russell Wilson was was getting closer with the Giants and that he was on their campus or whatever we call that. He was there longer than normal and he was working on some things. But the reality is he left and apparently did not have an offer from the Giants. And if that's the case, it tells me the Giants are probably still waiting on Aaron Rodgers as well. And the other part of it is I just read that Jameis Winston is visiting the Giants. So, I think one of the things that's interesting about the Giants versus the Steelers, the Giants seem to be trying to put a little pressure on Aaron Rodgers by inviting guys up there to visit. And you wonder, if that's the right approach. If you're the Giants, is basically by saying, oh, well, you know what? This is what we're going to do. We're going to keep bringing guys on campus until you make your decision. But if we get one of these guys on campus and we decide we really like them, well, guess what? What we're going to do then is basically we are going to, if that's the case, then what we're going to do is sign somebody else and you'll be out. So I don't think the Giants are going to do that, but I think that they're at least threatening to do that. And, if the talks with Russell Wilson went as well as they did, I would have thought, or as well as they've been reported, I would have thought he would have got a deal in New York. So it seems pretty clear to me that both the Giants and the Steelers want Aaron Rodgers more than Russell Wilson. It also seems pretty clear to me that if Aaron Rodgers chooses the Giants, I don't believe Russell Wilson will be signed here. I'm probably in the minority, but I don't believe. Here's the thing. The Steelers have made it pretty clear they're not interested in Russell Wilson. They haven't talked to Russell Wilson. They haven't talked contract with him since the end of the season. They haven't, even offered him anything. They haven't done anything that would make me, that would suggest to me that he's a legitimate option here. There's some people talking about trade options, guys like Kirk Cousins. Listen, if you're going to ask me Kirk Cousins or Mason Rudolph, I'll be much, much more interested in just letting Mason Rudolph be the starting quarterback. I really would. So, unfortunately for the Steelers and everything else, it looks to me like the Steelers have all their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket. And if it falls through, you know what? They've given themselves an out by signing Mason Rudolph. Because in signing Mason Rudolph, they can come to their fans, all of you, and say, listen, the guy did win a few games for us, and got us into the playoffs a few years ago. He's been a pretty reliable backup guy. The things he does really well, probably is going to play well in Arthur Smith's offense, especially with DK Metcalf now added to George Pickens, right? I think that's the thing that you need to understand. It's a situation of where I look at it and say, I think the Steelers are all in on Aaron Rodgers. I think the Giants may have a plan B of Russell Wilson if Aaron Rodgers doesn't happen. But to me, this is what we're really waiting for. And it's interesting. One of the questions I posed at the start of this, or at least in the notes for this, are the Steelers the team that everybody's using to basically for leverage? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that that's necessarily the case either. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is looking for leverage at this point. Here's what Aaron Rodgers is looking at. Here I'm going to try and take you into the mind of Aaron Rodgers, because everybody is convinced that this is a ego play, a power play, whatever, that he wants to be the center of attention, all that other stuff. I don't believe that, and here's why. Because he has to know that if he waits too long, he's not going to have a place to go play. I would be willing to bet there's 3 conversations going on in the head of Aaron Rodgers. Number one, he's 41 years old? Is that his age? 41, 40, however old he's got, however old he is. Let's look him up just to be completely accurate. He's 41 years old. He'll be 42 in December. Okay, 41 years old. Major surgery last year. Not this past year, but major surgery, a year and a half ago or whatever it was. Played in the NFL for, 18, 19 seasons. Already won a Super Bowl. Already has a gazillion dollars, in his bank account. At 41 years old, he's having 3 conversations with himself. Number one, do I want to play anymore? I mean, nobody seems to be talking about that. Might be actually part of what is the holdup here. He's 41. Does he want to play anymore? And, you can say, well, if he's contemplating retirement, he's already retired. No, that's not necessarily the case. It's a case of where he's saying, I need to really think about this and not be emotional about it. Because right at the end of the season, when your season ends and you have a bad season like he had with the Jets and all that other stuff, emotionally, you're going to make a decision, one of 2 things. One, what the hell with this? I don't need this anymore. I got enough money. I don't want to play anymore. Or the other thing is, I'm pissed off. I don't want this to be my last year, anything like this. So I'm just going to, go play. So when you're his age, I think you need to take some time to figure out, do you really want to play? Do you really want to play? And I think that's the biggest thing. Okay, yes, I want to play. So that's the first conversation probably going on in his head. The second conversation probably going on in his head has something to do with money. What is the least I'll take? I mean, I'll put my body through this again. I'll go through all the stuff you have to go to get ready to play. I'll do all that stuff because I do want to play some more. But how much am I willing to play for? In other words, if someone offers me $20 million a year, I'm not playing. It's not worth it to me. But what's sort of my minimum number? So we get right there. 1, do I want to play? 2, how much do I want to play for? It sounds like the Steelers and the Giants have offered him enough money. So now the question becomes, if you're him, what's number 3? I'm 41. I have 2 years tops. 2 years tops. I need to win a Super Bowl. Where is the best chance for me to go win a Super Bowl? There's a lot of people here that think that the Steelers offer a better opportunity than the Giants. I don't know about that. Maybe. But I know the Giants have made a lot of moves and they've changed their roster a lot. And you add Aaron Rodgers and he plays right, who knows? And the other part of it is maybe the NFC is a little easier to navigate than the AFC. In the NFC, you've got the Eagles and I guess the Lions, but for the most part, I don't know what else you have that you're really, that afraid of in the NFC. The Eagles, the Lions. Who else? Maybe the Bears get better, but again, I got to see it to believe it. At the end of the day, you really have 2 teams that you've got to get through. The NFC, go through the divisions if you don't believe me. The NFC West, who's the best team in the NFC West? The Rams. They've got an old quarterback. They've shed a couple more players. The Rams, the Seahawks, with Sam Dalton. I guess the Vikings, if you want to say the Vikings, but I don't know that the Vikings are really, that spectacular if we're talking about essentially a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Now look at the AFC. Man, it's a gauntlet. Even if the Steelers are better, the AFC, you've got to go through still Patrick Mahomes, which We can say whatever you can say whatever you want to say about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they're no longer dominant and all that other good stuff. But guess what? You still have to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Period. And unless you have a defense that can overwhelm them like the Eagles did, you still have to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. You have to beat Josh Allen in the playoffs. You have to beat Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, right? Start with those three teams. But I'll even go a little bit further. I think the Texans are going to be really good next year. I think that the Broncos are going to be better. The Chargers are interesting to me in year 2 of Jim Harbaugh. So it's just one of those things where I just feel like it might be a little easier in Aaron Rodgers' mind. Hey, if I go to the Giants, I got a better chance of getting to the Super Bowl than if I go to the Steelers, just because of who we got to get through to get there. And oh, by the way, let's not forget, he already just played for the Jets, which would suggest he probably has a house up there somewhere, right? And so if he has a house up there somewhere, then I would tell you maybe it's easier because he doesn't have to move. That's what I would tell you. There's so many factors. Everybody wants to, put their 2 cents in, and that's fine. But I got to be honest with you. When I see this kind of stuff, I basically say, let's try and really reason through this. I just think that's important. How do you reason your way through this? And in my mind, I think that people are missing the equation, really. It's one of those things where the equation is very, very simple. You got a 41-year-old guy who needs to decide, okay? They need to decide. He needs to decide whether or not he wants to play still. That being said, I just got some, breaking news came right across right now. Steelers are signing former Browns safety Juan Thornhill. So they added some depth, between him and some of the other moves they've made. I think they've really done a good job. They've done a really, really good job in some ways of rebuilding that secondary and getting it to a point where, I don't even know if you necessarily have to address it. I would probably still draft a corner, but you've got some young guys already, and if you're not going to get one early, it's going to be very, 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 I think not productive to sign another guy because you got a lot of young guys. Now, if you can get one in the first round, maybe you think about that. I don't know because you signed Darius Slay if you would do that. But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It would probably fill out their defense. But to me, I think the biggest thing is you have a situation there where, you've signed a safety, you've signed a corner, you actually signed 2 corners, you got, young guys who you're hoping come along. Your secondary is starting to become an area where you've got depth. You've got some players that can play at a reasonably high level. There's a lot to like about the secondary of the Steelers. There really is. And I think that's going to be the key here is all this sets you up for a situation where you get to the draft. Now you can focus on defensive line if you want to. You can get another receiver if you want to. And God forbid if things don't go well, you can get a quarterback, although I would not really be all that interested in a quarterback. I really wouldn't. That's just me, but I'm looking at the list of guys that we keep talking about, and I keep saying to myself, why? What quarterbacks would you really want? And so I think that's where we're at with it. And, if you're going to go get a quarterback that is a guy who you're going to pick in the 4th round just to have another, arm in camp, I don't know if I'd be that excited about it. I read something the other day where Brock Purdy might be available, which I don't know what the 49ers would be thinking if they're going to trade Brock Purdy, but if he's available, maybe the Steelers could make a trade for him. I just don't know. My point is, I look at the Steelers roster right now, and I say they're a 9 or 10 win team with Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers. So it doesn't matter to me. And quite frankly, if they just have Mason Rudolph, they're going to save $38, $40, $42 million where they can use it elsewhere to make the rest of the team better. So, I don't really believe Aaron Rodgers is playing the Steelers to try and get more money or leveraging the Steelers. I don't think a number of the other situations that we've seen where guys have visited this, because guys, visit a couple of places. But, at the end of the day, they have to make the best situation or they have to make the best choice for themselves. Kyle Juszczyk, if you look at what he did, he took less money from San Francisco. So if he's basically saying, if he's basically sitting here saying that he's leveraging something from the Steelers, what is he leveraging? He took less money. The one thing that's disappointing, and I'll say it again, the one thing that is really disappointing with the Steelers is, once again, for the most part, the first week of free agency, they now basically have, sat out. That's how they do things. That's how they are always going to do things, but it's frustrating. They made a couple of guys, they signed a couple of guys, but I don't know that any of them are like superstar guys and guys that changed the roster, high impact players. They added some depth. They added some players that can help them get better. They added and I guess I'm wrong too from this standpoint. DK Metcalf is obviously a guy who's an impact player. I do like him. I do like that signing, but again, it all comes down to who is throwing the ball to him still. And we're still sitting here now a week later, and we don't know. That's a problem. We don't know. And I'm not sure why. We don't know yet. But I don't believe for one second that he's playing the Steelers or whatever, or looking for leverage. I truly believe that he's trying to figure out if he wants to play still or not. Because at his age, his body's been beat up, played a lot of games. There is that point where you basically say, you know what, do I really want to do this anymore? And I just don't know that he does. On another note, the NCAA Tournament field came on. By the way, the game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's. Archie's on Carson Street, home of the 80-cent wings, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. When you get down there, say hello to Archie, as always. When you look at the NCAA Tournament field, I'm really in the minority, I think, this year. There are a lot of people who seem to think that this is going to be a really good NCAA tournament. I actually think that the NCAA field is down. I don't see any great teams. I think, Florida played well the last few weeks. Auburn at times has played well this year. Houston is what they are. I just don't know that there's any great teams anymore. I think what we're seeing is a transition in college basketball to, because of transfers and everything. Basically, every year these teams are just trying to become mercenaries. and you got all these players that are mercenaries and these teams that are just trying to compile them. And you get a team, that stunk last year like Louisville. You get the right kind of guys in, and guess what? All of a sudden, now you're, in the NCAA tournament. But to me, I'm looking at this field and I'm like, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see any great teams. I just don't. I think Duke is probably as close to a great team. They've got some NBA guys and high-end talent, but their NBA guys are young. But, I mean, I'm still sort of excited to watch the NCAA tournament just because it's the NCAA tournament. But I've heard a lot of people talk about how this is going to be some great, great tournament, how there's all these great teams. And I'm like, really? I just don't see that. I could be wrong, but I don't necessarily see that. I see, some teams, Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, they're interesting. Arizona and Texas Tech are interesting to me. Houston, obviously, is Houston, Duke. But, I mean, this could be a year again where we see either one of two things. Either the tournament is chalk because the middle of the field is so, bad. Like the middle of the field to the end is so bad. And it's chalk. And therefore, it's not really all that interesting. Or this could be the year where some team that's a middling type team in the field gets hot, makes a run, and gets to the Final Four. I don't know what it is, but I look at this field and I basically say, I don't know if I'm in love with this NCAA tournament this year. The one, controversy from yesterday, and here's the thing. You have to look at it from this perspective. If you're a team that's on the bubble and you don't get in, you really shouldn't be whining and crying. Because if you're on the bubble, I mean, that means that your team's, your team 65, 66, 67, 68. And I know that because of automatic qualifiers, it's more like you're probably more like team 34, 35, 36. But the reality is, you know what? It's not like we're leaving teams out that A, have a legitimate chance to win the national title, and B, have had like such spectacular seasons that it's a tragedy that they're out. Now, that being said, it's absolutely ridiculous that North Carolina got in. There's no justification for it. And as I've said many times before, when you look at North Carolina getting in this year, I would tell you this, okay? I would rather these committees, just like, with the football thing, I would rather these committees say, listen, we have two things we try and have to satisfy in many ways. One of them is we want to make sure that our power conferences are taken care of. And so the more teams we can squeeze in from the power conferences, the more units they get, the more money there is. And, of course, that keeps everybody happy. Okay. And number two, it's a television show. The NCAA tournament is not it's not really legitimately a playoff, so to speak. Because if it was, you wouldn't have teams that have losing records in their conference getting in. It's not. It's a television show. And because it is a television show, honestly, because it's a television show, 3 weeks of a television show, they want as many brand names as they can get in. I'm fully convinced that if Indiana hadn't fired their coach, I'm fully convinced they would have squeezed them in and Xavier would have been out. Because it's a brand name. North Carolina's in because they're a brand name, and they were close enough to the line that the committee could come up with whatever nonsense that they came up with in order to push them in. West Virginia fans are upset. I get it. West Virginia absolutely should have been the next team in. They should have been in over North Carolina. They should have been safely in, actually, over a few teams. But they're not. And at the end of the day, if you lose to Pitt by 25 and then you lose to Colorado in the Big 12 Big 12 tournament, I mean, really stop crying because you left it up to somebody else. I mean, if they beat Pitt or if they beat Colorado, they're probably in. By losing to Colorado, they gave the committee enough that they needed, that they were looking for, to go out and get, to go out and put North Carolina in. And I know it's a really bad look that the committee chair is Bubba, what's his name? Bubba Cunningham, the AD from North Carolina. But as someone pointed out, he was the chair 2 years ago when North Carolina was the first team out. So I'm not sure what really happens behind closed doors. I just wish that they were a lot more honest about it. I do. I wish they were a lot more honest and they would just say, listen, here's the bottom line. It's a TV show. We want TV. We want brand names. We want people to watch. Eyes on TVs. That's what we want. All right, we'll do it again tomorrow at 5. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to talk about a quarterback for the Steelers, but my gut tells me we probably won't. Before we meet again, however, enjoy your night, and we got to go to this thing right here, which is right here.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.